Hello there, my sleepy knights. Tonight, we delve into tales from old Japan. The night hung heavy and still over the remote province. An inky blackness pressed close against the earth. Hidesato, known to all as Tawara Toda or My Lord Bag of Rice, for reasons that will soon become clear, restlessly paced the weathered planks of his veranda. Sleep eluded him, chased away by annoying hunger, not of the belly, but of the spirit. A yearning for purpose, for glory, for a chance to prove himself. Hidesato was a warrior born, a samurai, his soul forged for battle. Yet, here he languished, days bleeding together in a blur of tedium and banality. The weight of unspent potential pressed upon him like an iron yoke, even as he itched to cast it off and ride towards destiny or death. On this night, a strange electric thrill crackled through his blood, whispering of momentous events about to unfold. Unable to ignore the pull any longer, Hidesato girded himself for a journey. Armor, blades, bow and arrows donned with the solemnity of a ritual. He slipped from his humble estate as silently as morning mist, dissipating under the sun's first rays. Let his household slumber on, undisturbed. This path was for him alone to tread. Hidesato melted into the night, every sense heightened, every nerve singing. The moon overhead was gravid with foreboding, its light throwing the craggy landscape into ominous relief. Gnarled pines clawed at the sky, their discordant shapes unsettling in the gloom. Yet he pressed on, a wraith drifting across the desolate vista. Soon, his path carried him to a sight both familiar and unnerving. The Seta Bridge, arcing over the glassy surface of Lake Biwa. Many times Hidesato crossed this span, but never before had it seemed to pulse with such energy. He hesitated at its threshold. The very air thrummed with a sense of held breath, of a realm poised upon a knife's edge. It was then he saw it. A shudder rippled across the bridge, and there, broad across its width, lay a serpentine behemoth, immense and horrific. It dwarfed the bridge that groaned beneath its hulk. Sickly grey scales rasped against stone, patterned with an oily iridescence. Spurred talons, nostrils flared and emitted curling tendrils of noxious smoke as the beast drowsed, its pitted hide expanding and deflating like demonic bellows. Fear coiled cold tendrils around Hidesato's heart, tight as a hangman's noose. The core of him cried to turn back, to flee this bridge that had become a nightmare incarnate. Yet that electric tingle still shivered along his spine, whispering of fate and purpose. Steeling himself, he stepped forward. 1 pace, 2, each footfall a drumbeat, each ragged breath a trumpet's blast to his own straining ears. Now, the monster filled his vision, blotting out all else. Its stench enveloped him, a miasma of decay and brimstone. The plates and scales of its hide were close enough to touch, pulsing with a corrupt vitality. But still, it did not stir. Hidesato placed 1 foot upon it. No reaction. He hitched himself up and over, every muscle rigid with tension, dreading the moment when jaws would snap shut around him. Slowly, he minced his way across the undulating expanse of hardened flesh, disgust and terror warring within him. At last, his sandals met stone once more as he dismounted the creature's flank. Not daring to breathe, he took 1 step away, then 2. It was only when he had placed 12 paces between himself and the slumbering dragon that Hidesato allowed a shaky sigh of relief. He turned, intending to put the nightmarish encounter behind him with all haste. A voice froze him mid-stride. Was it you who called me just now? Hidesato wheeled back around. Where moments before a monstrosity had lain, there now stood a figure, at once human and decidedly unhuman. Crimson tresses spilled from beneath a fearsome crown fashioned in the shape of a dragon's maw. Serpentine eyes blazed an eldritch green in a face seamed with age. The being was clad in undulating silks, silks that shimmered like some deep-sea creature dredged up from the depths of the ocean. An aura of raw power crackled around it like a localized thunderstorm. For a moment, the shock of this transformation paralyzed Hidesato's tongue. The gears of his mind spun, trying to process the incomprehensible scene. Then, haltingly, the words came. "I did not call out," he replied, impressed with the steadiness of his own voice. "But since you ask, who or what are you? What strange power allows you to shift form so?" The being inclined its head, lank hair falling across its face like a veil of blood. "I am the Dragon King of Lake Biwa," he intoned, voice resonant and hollow. "Long have I haunted this domain in dread serpent guise, waiting for a mortal of singular courage. Many have I seen, but all turned back in terror, until you. You alone walked across my prone form unflinching. That is why I have revealed myself. Hidesato gripped the hilt of his katana, anchoring himself with its familiar weight. "And what is it you want of me?" he asked, the query escaping more sharply than he intended. The Dragon King gazed at him, assessing. Luminous eyes seemed to peel back skin to sift through the very stuff of Hidesato's soul. At last, he spoke. "I have a request that only the bold of heart can grant. My eternal foe, a vile centipede demon, dwells in the mountains yonder." A taloned hand unfurled to point at a jagged peak silhouetted against the gravid moon. "For an age, this fiend has preyed upon my kind, devouring my subject and kin in twos and threes. We are powerless before it. So I have haunted this bridge, seeking a champion among men to rid us of this menace." A mirthless smile split the Dragon King's face. "Chance or destiny has brought you hence, Hidesato. Will you be the hero we seek? Will you dare to challenge the centipede and free us from its depredations? It is no small thing I ask, I know, but I have seen the ember of greatness glowing within you. Aid us, and that ember will be fanned to bonfire heights." Within Hidesato, war raged. The rational mind howled of madness to treat with dragons and battle monsters. Yet deep in his marrow, in that primal part that yearned for glory and craved a crucible in which to test itself, there was a spark leapt up in answer to the Dragon King's words. A chance to be more than human, more than a minor lordling, to touch the stuff of myth and legend. How could he, Hidesato, refuse such a calling? The decision crystallized. Hidesato sank to one knee, head bowed. Dragon King, I am yours to command. Point me to the centipede, and by my blade and bow, it will trouble you no more. Unseen by Hidesato, the Dragon King's smile sharpened, satisfaction writ in every curve of fang and scale. Rise then, champion. Your destiny awaits. What followed blurred the line between fever dream and fable. The Dragon King spirited Hidesato to the very depths of Lake Biwa, and there feted him in an undersea palace of eye-watering splendor. Fish-scale servants plied him with delicacies of surpassing savor, and brews that smoldered in the throat. All the while, haunting melodies threaded the waters, plucked from strings and flutes, held in fins and tentacles. Yet, beneath this wonder, tension thrummed, for the centipede's coming was foretold this very night. The Dragon King's folk could scarce contain their dread. Hidesato waited with them, a mortal adrift in an alien realm, nursing his cup and his courage in equal measure. Then it began. A rumble at the edge of hearing, rising, rising, building to a cacophonous roar. The palace shuddered, as if gripped by leviathan claws. Screams and curses in unknown tongues bounced off the curving walls. The Dragon King leapt to his feet. "It comes," he cried. "Hidesato, it is upon us." Hidesato surged to his feet, adrenaline a scorching flood in his veins. From an attendant's trembling fins, he snatched up his bow and quiver. "Where?" he barked, fighting to master the tremor in his hands. "Where must I aim?" "The mountain," groaned the Dragon King. "Look to the mountain." Hidesato bounded to a balcony, craned his head upward, peering through fathoms of water to the distant surface. There, twin spheres of balefire flared to malevolent life in the night. As he watched in creeping horror, they resolved into eyes. Eyes perched atop a segmented, undulating form that uncoiled from the mountain's bulk. The centipede came on, its passage a thundering avalanche that set the very lake bed to shivering. Yard after yard of armoured horror scraped across stone and soil. Hidesato swallowed a lump of dread clogging his throat and knocked an arrow to his bow. Sighting down the shaft, he drew a bead on the leftmost of those lambent eyes. At this distance, the shot seemed a forlorn hope, but that never stopped him before. Exhaling a breath slowly through his teeth, he let fly. The arrow lanced through the water quick as thought, streaking towards that hateful orange target. It struck true, only to ricochet off the beast's armoured brow with a mocking ping. The centipede trundled on, heedless. Cold sweat sprang up alongside Hidesato's spine. He grabbed another arrow from his shaft and aimed for the second glowering orb. Fired. Missed. His heart hammered a panicked staccato, even as his fingers danced across the bowstring. Shaft after shaft, he sent winging towards the onrushing monstrosity, until his quiver hung empty and useless at his side. And still the creature came on. Hidesato cast his bow aside with a clatter and spun to face the Dragon King. The Serpent Lord had slumped into his coral throne, coils hanging slack, eyes dimmed to guttering grey coals. My arrows are spent, Hidesato bit out, each word tasting of ash. And my arms have failed your people. Is there nothing else to be done? No other way to thwart this horror? The Dragon King stirred, as if shaking off a shroud of despondency. A forked tongue flickered out to taste the currents. Suddenly, a light kindled. There may be yet a way, he rasped, voice roughened by burgeoning hope. This centipede has one weakness. Its outer shell is impenetrable to weapons like arrows and swords, but its insides are soft and vulnerable. If you can find a way to attack it from the inside, you may be able to defeat it. Hidesato's brow furrowed. How? I would have to be swallowed whole too. His voice trailed off, as realization crashed over him in a frigid wave. The Dragon King met his gaze, solemn and unflinching, and in a reptilian stare, Hidesato read his fate. He closed his eyes, drinking in the darkness behind the lids. In that eclipse, grim purpose crystallized. When he opened them again, the fear was still there, pulsing in his chest like a second heart. But it was a chained thing, a beast he would master. "Ready my blade," he said to the Dragon King, and in his voice was the ring of iron. "I'll strike at this centipede's vitals from within." The Dragon King bowed his head. Gratitude and grief chased themselves across his time-worn features. "You have the thanks of my kind. Unto the ending of the age, Hidesato," he said. "May fortune speed your hand and fate preserve you." In short order, Hidesato was girded for battle once more. A curved short sword of unearthly keenness thrust through his sash. The Dragon King himself bore him up through the fathoms to the surface in a froth of churning water, depositing him upon a spot of land that jutted out from the lake like a rotted tooth. No sooner had his feet touched soil than the ground heaved beneath him. Reeling, he looked up and up and up. The centipede towered over him, blotting out the moon and stars with its impossible bulk. Close to it was a titan, a mountain of thrashing segmented limbs and yard-long scything teeth. Its breath washed over Hidesato, breath of decay. It perched mere yards away. Pinpricks of hell light danced in its compound gaze as it drank him in. Hidesato's very blood seemed to freeze and congeal in his veins. Every instinct shrieked at him to turn and flee, to burrow into the earth, anything to escape the imminence of his own demise. But, with a tortured effort of will, he held his ground. He had a duty to perform. Unhitching his blade, Hidesato raised it overhead. The steel caught the moonlight, flaring in his hands like a beacon. He bellowed a wordless battle cry to the indifferent heavens, putting into it every ounce of rage, despair, suicidal defiance that clawed at his heart. The centipede stirred. Ponderously, it dipped its head downward, sighting in on the puny human form below him. Saliva dribbled from its maw in glutinous ropes. Its jaw drifted open, a crack in the world into darkness. The centipede lunged. Hidesato leapt forward like an arrow loosed from the string, hurling himself into the abyss of the centipede's throat. The stink was unspeakable, a clinging foulness that seared the lungs and blistered the flesh. Undulant, pulsing walls closed in around him, seeking to crush the life and light from his body. And Hidesato's blade flashed in the gloom, hewing at the rank meat that pressed against him. Deeper and deeper, the centipede's gullet bore him, the beast's alien anatomy, resisting his every effort to orient himself. Wriggling, writhing, he was being swept along by the clenching motion, sword flickering out again and again. Maddened by darkness, surely doomed, suffocating, and then light, a dim pulsing luminance, the centipede's heart, its beat staggering. Hidesato raised his blade with a snarl, wrapped both his fists around the hilt, and plunged it into the meat of the heart. The centipede rolled and thrashed, a cataclysm in flesh, but still Hidesato soared and stabbed, screaming his own inarticulate fury. Again and again, the sword rose and fell until his arms burned with effort, until the heart was a ruined mass, until at last, shudderingly, the thunder of the centipede's death throes dwindled into dreadful silence. Hidesato sagged, the blade clattering from his nerveless fingers. It was over. Somehow, impossibly, it was done. He threw back his head and loosed a ragged cry of exhaustion. The sound echoed strangely in the humid confines of the centipede's throat. Hidesato, half swimming, half crawling, dragged his gore-slicked body through folds of lifeless flesh. Time lost all meaning in that reeking, clammy darkness. It might have been minutes or hours later that he finally burst free into clean air once more, flopping gracelessly onto the blood-drenched earth. He lay there for a long moment, chest heaving, limbs quivering with mingled revulsion and relief. The night sky wheeled overhead, stars stuttering crazily before his eyes, until he realized it was his own vision that shook. A giddy, unhinged laugh bubbled up from some raw place in his chest. He was alive, against all odds and reason. He was alive. Gradually, other sensations filtered in. Waves lapping against the shore, the iron tang of blood in his mouth, and threading it all, a distant sound. Cheering, raucous, full-throated, joyously incredulous cheering. Shading his eyes against the sudden dazzle, Hidesato lifted his head. The surface of Lake Biwa roiled and seethed as if stirred by a typhoon wind. Dozens, hundreds of scaled heads breached the waves. The Dragon King's folk, somehow knowing their nemesis was no more. Their cries of celebration echoed off the cliffs and set the waters to frothing. And at their head, resplendent in his royal regalia, swam the Dragon King himself. Tears of unabashed relief streaked his craggy face. "Hidesato," he cried, his voice a boom that put the thunder to shame. "Noble Hidesato, bravest and best of men, you have done it. The centipede is slain and my people are delivered." A fresh swell of exhausted satisfaction washed through Hidesato's aching frame. With a grunt of effort, he pushed himself to his feet and executed a wobbly bow. The honor was mine, Dragon King. The Dragon King threw his head back and laughed, a sound of pure, unadulterated joy. Honor and glory will be heaped upon your name forevermore. But for now, you must rest and heal. Come, let us return to my palace and celebrate this great victory. Hidesato didn't remember much of the journey back to the Dragon King's hall. The battle fever was swiftly deserting him, leaving behind a haze of bone-deep exhaustion. Dimly, He registered cool hands bearing him up, a shivery brush of scales against his skin as he was lowered into the silken waters. Then it all dissolved into a blur of colour and sound, an undersea revelry the likes of which he had never known. The Dragon King and his court plied him with exotic brews to knit his wounds and soothe his hurts. They draped him in robes of finest kelp silk and crowned his brow with a wreath of luminous pearls. Throughout the palace's meandering wings and gardens, the festivities reached a fever pitch. Schools of fishfolk dancing and swirling, drummers beating out intoxicating rhythms. At the center of it all, Hidesato reclined on a bed of softest sponge, and his still tender flesh sighing in relief. Tended to by a bevy of solicitous mermaid handmaidens, a great weight seemed to fall away from his heart. For this night at least, the cares of the surface world felt distant. Here, now, he could be more than a man. He could be a legend. He could be the hero of his own saga. The celebration lasted 3 days and 3 nights. The Dragon King, a genial host throughout. But at last, Hidesato said it was time to return to his own plane and existence. The Dragon King did not try to dissuade him, though a certain melancholy hung about his majestic form. You have done my people a service beyond recompense, the Dragon King said, clasping Hidesato's shoulder tightly. And know this, that you will be forever a friend to the merfolk of Lake Biwa. Should you ever have need, you have but to speak my name to the waters. I will hear, and I will come. Hidesato bowed deeply, moved beyond words. The honor is mine, he managed at last, voice roughened by emotion. I will carry the memory of your people's bravery and generosity with me all of my days. The Dragon King smiled then, and there was a glint of slyness in his ageless eyes. And we would see you carry more than memory away from this place. Come, I have gifts to bestow upon you before you depart. He led Hidesato through the winding palace halls to a vaulted chamber that glowed with a light all its own. There, arrayed on pedestals of carved coral, lay the promised presents. First, intoned the Dragon King, lifting up a bronze bell of exquisite craftsmanship. This sacred chime, to bestow clarity of spirit and summon aid in times of need. Second, he continued, indicating a silken sack brimming with grain. This enchanted bag of rice, never diminishing, never emptying, to sustain you always in plenty. Third, said the Dragon King, unfurling a bolt of shimmering cloth, this roll of dragon silk, impervious to blade or arrow, to armor you against any misfortune. Fourth, he gestured to a black iron cooking pot, its surface absorbing light, a magical cauldron to prepare any meal desire without flame or fuel. And lastly, the Dragon King turned to lift up a leather-bound book, its pages crackling with arcane energies. This book of deepest sorceries, to lend you wisdom beyond mortal knowing when all other hope seems lost. Hidesato could only gape, thunderstruck at the bounty laid before him. He started to stammer out a protest that it was far too much, but the Dragon King cut him off with an upraised hand. Take them, the Dragon Monarch said, and his voice rang with the authority of ages. Use them well, and use them wisely. And when bards sing of your deeds, remember whence they came. And so, Hidesato departed the Dragon King's realm, a hero blessed beyond all reckoning. He carried his prizes back to shore. Each one seemed to pulse with secret potential against his skin. The journey home passed as if in a dream. Fields and villages streamed by, made new and strange by the weight of destiny settling around Hidesato's shoulders. He was a changed man, transfigured by his ordeal. Where once he was a restless soul, now a seasoned warrior walked back, purpose burning in his belly. His age of tedium was over. The age of legend had begun. And from that day forth, fortune seemed to follow Hidesato's footsteps. The Dragon King's gifts proved every bit as potent as promised. The rice sack banished hunger from his household and let him feed the poor for miles around. The book allowed him to smite sickness and blight, to call rain from cloudless skies. The dragon silk and the sorcerer's cauldron made him undefeatable in battle and unmatched in hospitality. And always the sacred chime rang out, bringing hope wherever its melody was heard. Hidesato's fame spread throughout the land. Ballads extolling his deeds hummed in every town. Bards took to calling him Tawara Toda, or My Lord Bag of Rice, and the name and the legend behind it passed into story and song. Some said he was more than human, a dragon-souled demigod gracing the earth. Others declared him an ancestral spirit sent to steer the course of history. But to the folk he protected and provided for, he was simply their hero. The man who had walked with monsters and returned to this mortal plane a savior. The Dragon King was as good as his word, sending aid and advice whenever Hidesato called, an alliance to shake the very foundations of the earth. Together, they ushered in an era of peace and plenty. The old gods and the new, working hand in hand to craft a better, brighter world. And if their partnership was sometimes touched by strangeness, shot through with weird workings beyond the kin of men, well, such was the price of trafficking with powers from beneath the waves. As the years lengthened and silver touched Tawara Toda's brow, he would often look out across the waters of Lake Biwa, a wistful smile on his weathered face. And he would remember a fantastical underwater world, a place touched by sorcery and sacrifice, and things that walked unseen by mortals. He would recall the sweet ache of destiny, a taste of glory on his tongue, a life transformed in blood and pearls. And sometimes, when the wind was right and the moon hung low, he fancied he heard a voice calling his name beneath the waves, deep and fathomless, and shot through with fondness. Perhaps one day he would seek its source again, strip off the mantle of mortality like an old worn cloak, and plunge laughing into the abyss of legend. One day. For now, Tawara Toda had a duty to protect his homeland and serve his people. The Dragon King's blessings were both a gift and a responsibility. Although he occasionally felt a deep longing for the underwater realm, as if the essence of the dragons had become a part of him since his adventures years ago, he had come to terms with it. He accepted that he would be forever connected to both the human world and the dragon realm, serving as a bridge between the two. This was the destiny of a true hero. Such was the saga of Hidesato, Tawara Toda, my lord, bag of rice. In an age long past, in the storied city of Kyoto, there lived a soldier of surpassing valor named Kintoki. Fate saw fit to bless him with the love of a fair maiden, and, in the fullness of time, they were wed. But alas, the cruel machinations of false friends brought about Kintoki's fall from grace. His once shining star cast down from the firmament of the court. So heavy weighed this disgrace upon his noble spirit that he soon surrendered to the inexorable embrace of death, leaving his cherished wife to navigate the tempestuous seas of life alone. Fearful of the malevolent designs of her late husband's foes, the grieving widow fled to the untamed wilds of the Ashigara Mountains, seeking sanctuary amidst its shadowed glades. There, in a realm seldom trod by any save the hardy woodcutters, she brought forth a son, a child she named Kintaro, the Golden Boy. From the very first, it was clear that Kintaro was no ordinary babe. The spark of destiny smouldered in his breast, and an uncanny strength suffused his every sinew. As the boy grew, so too did his might, waxing with each passing season until, by his 8th year, he could fell trees with the same ease as the seasoned woodcutters who plied their trade in those remote forests. His mother, recognizing this power within him, bestowed upon Kintaro a mighty axe, a talisman to channel his otherworldly vitality. And so, the young champion ranged through the mountainside, lending his prodigious strength to the efforts of the woodcutters. They knew him as Wonder Child, and his mother as the old nurse of the mountains, little suspecting the noble blood that coursed through their veins. Kintaro's favorite pastimes were the stuff of legend. He would cleave great boulders asunder with his bare hands, a testament to the potency of his ever-growing might. And it is said that unlike other children, Kintaro's companions were not of mortal kind. For you see, nurtured in the heart of the mountains, he forged bonds with the creatures that called those untamed lands home. He learned to decipher their secret speech to understand the language of beasts, and, in time, they came to revere him as their undisputed master. The animals became his loyal retainers, his emissaries to realms beyond the ken of man. Chief among them were the bear, the deer, the monkey, and the hare. An unlikely group, united in their devotion to the golden boy. The bear, with her great shaggy bulk and razor-keen claws, would often bring her cubs to play with Kintaro. And when the day's frolics were done, he would clamber atop her back and ride to the sanctuary of her cave. The deer, too, were much cherished companions, and Kintaro would frequently entwine his arms around her slender neck, heedless of the formidable antlers that crowned their heads. And so, amidst the timeless forests and mist-shrouded peaks, Kintaro and his fantastical fellowship lived and played, boundless together by ties of love and loyalty that transcended the boundaries of the mortal world. As the sun arced high over the mountains, Kintaro and his faithful companions, the bear, the deer, the monkey, and the hare, set out once more into the wild, a merry band bound by the ties of friendship. They trod paths seldom walked by man, up rocky slopes and down verdant hills, until at last they emerged onto a vast grassy plain, a sea of wild flowers rippling in the warm breeze. Here was a place of wonder and delight, a playground for the spirits of the forest. The deer rubbed his majestic antlers against a sturdy tree. The monkey, grinning impishly, scratched his back with his nimble fingers. The hare, serene and regal, smoothed his elongated ears with a paw, and the bear, mightiest of them all, rumbled her contentment deep in her massive chest. Kintaro, surveying the scene of tranquility, felt a surge of inspiration. "My friends," he cried, "behold the stage for our next great contest. What say you to a tournament of wrestling, to test our strength and skill against one another?" The bear, as was her right as the eldest and most powerful, spoke for the assembled beasts. "A splendid notion, golden child," he growled. "I shall undertake to build the ring, a platform worthy of noble sport." And with that, she set about her task with gusto, gouging the earth with her curved claws, stamping the soil flat with her immense paws. "I shall observe the matches," proclaimed Kintaro, "and bestow prizes upon the victors of each bout. Let the games begin." A chorus of joyful assent rose from the animals, and they fell to with a will, assisting the bear in shaping the arena that would soon echo with the grunts and cries of earnest struggle. At last, the wrestling ring stood ready, a circle of bare earth bathed in sunlight. Kintaro strode to its center and bellowed, "The monkey and the hare shall inaugurate our contest, and the deer shall serve as umpire. Take your places, valiant competitors." With a sprightly bound, the monkey and the hare leapt onto the platform, eyes gleaming with anticipation. The deer, solemn in his officiation, positioned himself between the two contenders. "Redback," he cried to the monkey, and Long Ears to the hare, "are you prepared?" The wrestlers nodded their assent, crouching into position. The deer lifted a leaf aloft, a vibrant green banner fluttering in the breeze. A breathless hush fell over the assembled beasts. And then, with a swift motion, the leaf fell, and the monkey and the hare sprang at each other. Ah, and what a match it was! The monkey darted and feinted, seeking to ensnare his foe with wiry arms. The fleet-footed hare bounded and twisted, striving to throw his opponent with a powerful kick. Back and forth they struggled, now one gaining the advantage, now the other. The deer, vigilant in his role, called out with encouragement and caution in equal measure. "Redback, hold fast. Long Ears, beware the edge." And it is said that in the end, it was the hare who triumphed, catching the monkey off balance and sending him tumbling from the ring with a mighty shove. The crestfallen primate sat rubbing his bruised hinds, a petulant scowl etched across his features. "Alas," he complained, "an unfair match. My foot slipped on an ill-placed pebble. I demand another round." Kintaro consented to a rematch, but the monkey's cunning nature surfaced in the second bout. Snatching hold of the hare's elongated ear, he used the leverage to dash his startled foe to the ground, claiming victory in an instant. Now it was he who received the prize of a succulent rice dumpling from Kintaro's own hand. And so the matches proceeded, the deer taking his own turn in the ring against the hare, a study in contrasts, antlers against ears, hoofs against paws. In the end, all had their moment of triumph and defeat, and the merry band laughed and jested as the shadows lengthened and the day drew on. At last, golden Kintaro rose and stretched, the very image of youthful vitality. Enough for today, my companions. We have found a splendid playground for our sporting pursuits. Let us return tomorrow and continue our friendly rivalry. But for now, home calls, and we must answer. With that, the boy wonder set off down the winding trail. His loyal group of beasts following close behind. The mountains echoed with their chatter and laughter as they descended through the cool green shadows, each dreaming of the glory and camaraderie that the morrow would bring. As the merry band of friends emerged from the dappled shade of the forest, they found their path arrested by a swiftly flowing river. The water churned and frothed, a ceaseless torrent that cut through the valley like a blade of liquid silver. Kintaro and his faithful companions stood upon the bank, perplexed by this new challenge that lay before them. For you see, no bridge spanned the restless waters. No ford offered safe passage to the other side. The river rushed onward with a deafening roar. The animals exchanged glances, each pondering how they might traverse this formidable barrier and return to their forest homes before the sun sank below the horizon. But Kintaro, ever the resourceful leader, disarmed their concerns with a confident smile. "Fear not, my friends," he declared. "Give me but a few moments, and I shall construct a bridge that will see us all safely cross." The creatures of the forest watched in fascination as the golden boy strode along the riverbank, appraising the trees that grew in stately ranks beside the water's edge. At last, he paused before a mighty specimen, a towering giant whose roots delved deep into the rich, dark soil. Kintaro grasped the trunk with both hands, his muscles tensing like coiled springs. Once, twice, thrice he heaved, each effort mightier than the last. And then, a resounding crack that echoed through the valley. The tree's roots tore free from their earthly bed. The wood toppled, its vast bulk arcing through the air to land with a thunderous splash across the river's breadth. "Behold!" cried Kintaro, gesturing to the impromptu bridge that now spanned the churning waters. "Is it not a marvel? Come, let us cross, for our path is clear." And with that, he bounded nimbly onto the fallen tree, his footsteps sure and steady upon the rough bark. The animals followed in his wake, marveling at the strength they had just witnessed. "How mighty he is!" they exclaimed to one another. "Truly, there is no other like Kintaro in all the land." Unbeknownst to the happy band, their actions had not gone unobserved. For you see, high above, on a rocky cliff, a woodcutter stood in silent awe, scarcely able to believe the sight that unfolded beneath him. He watched, slack-jawed, as Kintaro uprooted the massive tree with no more effort than a child plucking a flower. Then he watched him laid across the river, as casually as one might drape a scarf around one's neck. The woodcutter rubbed his eyes, half convinced that this must be some strange dream or forest enchantment. But no, the vision persisted, and he knew that he was witnessing something extraordinary. "This is no ordinary child," he murmured to himself. "Whose son could possess such unnatural vigor? I must learn the truth of this before the day is done." And with stealthy steps, the woodcutter hastened to follow Kintaro and his companions, crossing the makeshift bridge in their wake. But the golden boy, absorbed in his simple joy of camaraderie, remained oblivious to this new shadow. As the group reached the other side of the river, they bid each other fond farewells. The animals to their dens and burrows deep in the greenwood, and Kintaro to the welcoming arms of his mother. The little cottage where mother and son dwelt was a humble little thing, nestled like a precious jewel in the heart of the whispering pines. As Kintaro ducked through the low doorway, he called out in a voice bright with affection, "Oka-san, I have returned." His mother, a woman as gentle and radiant as the moon, greeted him with a smile that banished all shadows. "Oh, Kimbo," she exclaimed, "how late the hour grows. I had begun to fear for your safety. Where have your wanderings taken you on this fine day?" Kintaro regaled her with the tale of his adventures, of the wrestling tournament he had staged high in the hills, pitting his animal friends against one another in friendly contest. He spoke of the morrow and the promise of further games and tests of strength. His mother, eyes twinkling with secret amusement, pressed him for more details. "And who, my son, emerged as the mightiest of all?" Kintaro laughed, a sound as pure and joyous as a mountain stream. "Why, Oka-san, surely you jest, for none can match my strength. There was no need for me to wrestle any of my companions." "Huh? But who then would you deem the second strongest?" his mother persisted playfully. "The bear, without a doubt," Kintaro replied. "His power is like the mountains themselves, vast and unshakable." "And after the bear?" his mother prodded, eyes dancing with merriment. Kintaro paused. "In truth, it is difficult to say. The deer, the monkey, and the hare all seem evenly matched. Perhaps tomorrow's contest will settle the matter once and for all." As Kintaro and his mother sat in the warm glow of their humble cottage, their quiet conversation was suddenly pierced by a voice from beyond the threshold. "Ho there, young master," the voice called out, rich and resonant. "The next time you venture into the mountains to test your strength, allow this old man to join you. I would fain participate in your spirited competition." The speaker was none other than the woodcutter who had witnessed Kintaro's extraordinary feat at the river. Slipping off his worn sandals, he stepped unbidden into the cottage, his presence filling the small space like a great oak in a grove of saplings. Kintaro and his mother could only stare in mute astonishment at this unexpected visitor. "Who are you?" they demanded in unison. their voices a mingled chorus of confusion and curiosity. The woodcutter threw back his head and laughed, a sound as deep and rolling as distant thunder. My identity is of little import at this moment, he declared, eyes glinting with amusement. But let us put our respective strengths to the test and see who emerges the victor, the boy or the old man. Kintaro, a child of the untamed forests, saw no need for formalities. If it is a challenge you seek, well then, I accept, he proclaimed. But let there be no ill will between us, regardless of the outcome. With that, the two unlikely opponents clasped hands, their fingers interlocking like the roots of ancient trees. They strained against each other, muscles bunching and quivering beneath their skin. Time seemed to stretch and warp as they grappled. A tableau of primal struggle frozen in the heart of the woodland cottage. To Kintaro's amazement, the old woodcutter matched him strength for strength, his arm unyielding as the boughs of the mountain pines. They wrestled back and forth, neither gaining the upper hand, until, at last, the woodcutter relented, conceding a draw. Truly, you are a child of prodigious might, the old man said, rubbing his wrist. Few grown men can boast the power I felt in your grasp. I first laid eyes upon you at the river and beheld a sight that defied belief. A mere boy uprooting a tree of monstrous size to forge a bridge across raging waters. Scarcely trusting my own senses, I felt compelled to follow you to this secret place. The woodcutter turned to face Kintaro's mother, his gaze searching. Tell me, good woman, have you never considered bringing your son to the capital to nurture his talents, to train him in the ways of the samurai? I believe it is a sin to hide such potential away in the wilderness. Kintaro's mother's eyes glistened with unshed tears. "Kind sir, you honor us with your concern. But my Kintaro, he is a wild creature, unschooled in the ways of civilized men. When he was but a babe, his strength was so great that he posed a danger to all around him. It was for this reason that I spirited him away to the mountains, where he could grow unfettered. And though I have often dreamed of seeing him bear the twin swords of a samurai, I fear it shall remain but a dream. We have no allies, no benefactors to smooth our path to the capital. At this, the woodcutter's face split into a grin, as if privy to some cosmic jest. "Ah, but that is where you are wrong, good woman. You see, the truth is, I am no mere woodcutter, but rather one of the great generals of our realm. My name is Sadamitsu, vassal to the indomitable lord, Minamoto no Raiko himself. My master has tasked me with scouring the land in search of youths, blessed with uncommon strength and courage. Those who might one day serve as the bulwark of his armies. It was for this purpose that I donned the guise of a humble laborer. The general leaned forward, his eyes blazing with intensity. Fate has brought me to your doorstep and delivered into my hands a gem of rarest quality. If it is truly your wish to see Kintaro walk the path of the samurai, I shall bear him hence to the capital and present him to Lord Raiko as a candidate for service. What say you to this proposition? As the import of the general's words sank in, Kintaro's mother felt a great weight lift from her heart. Here, by the gods, was the answer to her most ardent prayers. She looked at the general deeply in the eyes. If you speak true, then I entrust my son's destiny to your hands. Put him on the path of the samurai, she said, her voice trembling with joy and trepidation. May you guide him to greatness. Kintaro, who had listened in silent wonder to this exchange, could barely contain himself no longer. "Oh, joy of joys," he exclaimed, his face alight with anticipation. "To journey forth with the great general, to one day bear the mark of the samurai. 'Tis a dream made flesh." And so it was settled. General Sadamitsu would depart at once for the capital, the golden child Kintaro at his side. His mother, though her heart ached at the parting, held back her tears in check, determined not to dim her son's hour of triumph. Kintaro, in turn, vowed never to forget his mother's love and sacrifice. Turning to her, he said, "When I am a true samurai, bearing the twin swords of my station, I promise I will return for you, mother," he said, "and I shall build you a palace and ensure that your sunset years are swaddled in comfort and honor." But, of course, it was not only Kintaro's mother who felt the keen sting of loss at Kintaro's departure. The animals of the forest, those loyal companions who had served him with unwavering devotion, gathered round to bid their beloved master farewell. The bear, the deer, the monkey, and the hare, each had carved a place in Kintaro's heart, and the thought of leaving them behind was a bitter draught to swallow. "Mr. Kintaro," the animals chorused, their eyes glistening with unshed tears. "May the gods grant you health and prosperity on your journey. May your path be straight and true, and your heart never waver." As Kintaro took his first steps down the mountain path, his loyal friends scampered up the trunk of a nearby tree, desperate to prolong their final glimpse of the boy who had brought so much joy to their lives. They watched, transfixed, as his figure dwindled in the distance, growing smaller and smaller, until at last he vanished from sight, swallowed up by the vast tapestry of the world beyond. General Sadamitsu, for his part, could scarcely contain his elation at having discovered such a rare and precious gem. For you see, he knew in his marrow that Kintaro was destined for greatness, that the boy's name would one day resound through the halls of history like the tolling of a mighty bell. And when at last they arrived at the capital, the general wasted no time in presenting his young charge to the illustrious Lord Minamoto Naraiko. Raiko, a man of keen insight and unerring judgment, saw at once the potential that blazed within Kintaro's eyes. The tales of the boy's prowess, of his courageous spirit and peerless strength, had set the nobleman's heart alight with anticipation. Without hesitation, he took Kintaro into his service, confident that the boy would one day prove an invaluable asset to his realm. And as the years passed by, Kintaro grew into a man of unrivaled might and courage. Lord Raiko bestowed upon him the ultimate honor, the leadership of his most elite warriors, the legendary 4 Braves. We see these peerless samurai, hand-picked by Raiko himself, are renowned throughout Japan for their unflinching devotion and matchless skill in battle. And Kintaro, it was whispered, was the mightiest of them all. It was not long before Kintaro's mettle was put to the test. Whispers reached the capital of a terrible beast that had taken up residence in the wilderness beyond the city walls. A monstrous creature with an insatiable hunger for human flesh. Lord Raiko, knowing that only a warrior of exceptional valor could hope to vanquish such a foe, dispatched Kintaro to rid the land of this menace. Kintaro rode forth with fire in his heart and steel in his hand, relishing the chance to prove his worth as a true samurai. It is said that Kintaro confronted the beast within its own lair, a whirlwind of flashing blades and indomitable will. Though the creature was mighty, it was no match for Kintaro's consummate skill. With a final, decisive blow, the young warrior severed the monster's head from its shoulders, proclaiming his first great victory in the name of Lord Raiko. From that day forth, Kintaro's star ascended to ever greater heights. He became a living legend, a shining exemplar of the samurai ideal. Wealth and glory beyond measure were heaped upon him. But through it all, he remained true to his word. With a heart full of love and gratitude, he built a magnificent palace for his aging mother, ensuring that her final years were spent in the lap of luxury, cherished and revered by all who knew her. This is the real diary of Katsu Kokichi, a low-ranking samurai. Written around 1843, when he was 42. It chronicles a life of spectacular misbehavior. Brawling, gambling, frequenting in brothels, and terrorizing his neighborhood with a gang of followers. What makes this account remarkable is its brutal honesty. Kokichi spent decades flaunting every rule his samurai class held sacred, then looked back in horror at his own conduct. This is both confession and cautionary tales, written as a warning to his descendants about the consequences of a life without moral restraint. The diary offers a rare glimpse into the underbelly of samurai society, far from the idealized image of noble warriors. Through Kokichi's eyes, we see the reality of impoverished, bored samurai struggling with the gap between their class's lofty ideals and mundane circumstances. His transformation from neighborhood terror to repentant family man makes this one of literature's most compelling tales of personal reform. Let's begin. Although I indulged in every kind of foolishness and nonsense in my lifetime, heaven seems not to have punished me as yet. Here I am, 42, in good health and without a scratch on my body. Some of my friends were beaten to death. Others vanished without a trace, or suffered one fate or another. I must have been born under a lucky star, the way I did whatever I pleased. No other samurai with such a low salary spent money as I did. And how I blustered and swaggered around with a trail of followers at my back. I wore kimonos of imported silk and fine fabrics that were beyond the reach of most people. I ate my fill of good food, and all my life I bought as many prostitutes as I liked. I lived life fully. Only recently have I come to my senses, begun to act more like a human being. I have no learning to speak of, having taught myself to write only in my 20s, and barely enough to cover my own needs at that. My friends were all bad and none good, unable to distinguish between right and wrong. I took my excesses as the behavior of heroes and brave men. In everything I was misguided, and I will never know how much anguish I caused my relatives, parents, wife, and children. Even more reprehensible, I behaved most disloyally to my lord and master, the shogun, and with uttermost defiance to my superiors. Thus did I finally bring myself to this lower state. When I think of my past, my hair stands on end. He who would call himself a man would do well not to imitate my ways. Gambaru is a Japanese phrase. It means to work hard, persevere through times. Though the ability to endure and power through is admirable, sometimes it's a good idea to take a break and reflect. There can't be many in the world as foolish as I am. I was the child of my father's concubine. She fell out of favor with him, and I was taken in by my father's wife. I think of her as my real mother, and put under the care of a wet nurse. I was naughty from the time I was little, and made life difficult for my mother. With my father away at his office every day, I acted up, was so headstrong. They were all at their wits' end. We lived in the Abura Hori section of Fukagawa. In the garden, there was an ornamental pond filled with water drawn from a nearby canal. During the summer, I would swim in it every day. My mother suffered from palsy and had trouble getting around. The rest of the household was also female. I looked down on all of them and spent my days getting into one kind of mischief or another. When I was 5, I took part in a kite fight against Rokichi, the son of a laborer in Maicho. Chokichi, who was older by about 3 years, seized my kite, smashed it, and took away the string. I picked up a jagged rock and, grabbing hold of the collar of his kimono hit him in the face. Blood came out of his lips, and Chokichi began bawling. My father happened to see this from over the garden fence. He sent one of his men to fetch me home. "What do you mean?" he said angrily. "Hurting someone's child like that. You can't be left unpunished." He tied me to one of the posts in the veranda and whacked me on the head with a wooden clock. To this day, I have a bald spot and a dent where he struck me. The razor gets caught and nicks the skin whenever I shave my head. And each time I'm reminded of Chokichi. I was adopted by the Katsu family when I was 7. My age was officially given as 17. And the hair at the front of my head was cut off accordingly as part of the adoption procedure. Ishikawa, the commissioner of my unit, and his assistant, Obi, came to the house. "How old are you and what is your name?" Ishikawa asked. "My name is Kokichi, and I'm 17. Ishikawa pretended to be taken aback. "Well, for 17 you certainly look old." He burst out laughing. I got into another fight over a kite, again with some boys from Maicho. There must have been 20 or 30 of them. I took them on alone, hitting and punching, but they finally got the better of me. My hair had fallen loose over my face, and I was sobbing. I took out my short sword, slashed left and right, but I knew I was beaten, and decided there and then to commit harakiri, ritual suicide. I stripped to the waist and sat down on a rock. As it happened, a rice dealer by the name of Shirakoya was standing nearby. He talked me into giving up the idea and took me home. After all this, though, all the boys in the neighborhood became my followers. I was 7 at the time. When I was 9, my father took me to take judo lessons with Suzuki Sebe, a relative of the Katsu family. I behaved myself at first, but soon got into mischief. My fellow students strongly disliked me and ganged up against me all the time. On the day an all-night midwinter session was to be held, we received permission from the teacher to bring food. We took a break at midnight, I packed a lacquer box full of bean jam cakes, and had been looking forward all day to this moment when we would share the food. But my classmates had other plans. They got together and tied me up with an obi sash, hoisted me to one of the rafters, and began eating, even helping themselves to the cakes. So I pissed on their heads, spraying the food that had been spread out, and naturally everything had to be thrown away. Served them right, too. When I was 11, I became a student of Udono, a sword master in Godai. I liked the fact that Udono exclusively taught the technique for the wooden sword, and I practiced diligently. The son of Ishikawa, my commissioner, was also in my class. He knew all about me, how much rice allowance was, and so forth, and taunted me in front of the other students at every opportunity. Katsu, what's your allowance? Measly 40 bales of rice? Ha ha. Since he was the commissioner's son, I kept quiet. But he continued to make fun of me. So, one day, I hit him good and hard with my wooden sword, cursed him out, and left him blubbering. When I was 12, my brother, Hiko Shiro, arranged for me to begin school. He took me to the Shungate Academy in Yoshima. I began by studying the Chinese classic, The Greater Learning. At most, I learned to read about 5 or 6 pages. The 2 teachers soon sent word that they didn't want me, which suited me just fine. So I did nothing but ride. With all my money gone, I began stealing from my mother's money and the cash she had set aside for emergencies. My brother was away in Shinano at the time on a 5-year assignment as a district administrator. When he heard I was spending all my time and money on writing, he ordered me to give up lessons and sent a letter to my teacher giving notice. He also scolded me severely and told me to stay at home for a while. I couldn't leave the house. What a pain that was. When I was 14, I made up my mind to run away to the Kyoto area and stay there for the rest of my life. After all, I thought, no matter what a man puts his hand to, he'll always be able to eat. On the 28th day of the 5th month, I put on a pair of trousers over my kimono and set off. I didn't know a thing about the world, and as for money, I had only the 7 or 8 gold rial I'd stolen and tucked in the band I wrapped around my stomach. Asking directions along the way, I got as far as Shinagawa. I was lonely and frightened, but I pressed on, and I stayed the night at an inn in Fujisawa. The next morning I woke up and walked around aimlessly, wondering what to do. 2 tradesmen caught up with me. "Where are you heading?" they asked. "No particular place," I said. "Maybe somewhere near Kyoto." "Come along with us. We're going that way too." Taking heart, I went with them to Odawara. The night at the inn, they said, "Tomorrow, we'll be passing through the checkpoint at Hakone. Have you got a travel permit?" "I've never heard of such a thing." "Give us 200 coppers, and we'll get one for you." I did as they said, and was led through the checkpoint the next day. All along, I remained on my guard, but by the time we stopped at Hamamatsu for the night, I felt I could trust them, since they'd taken such good care of me. So, before going to sleep, I took off all my clothes. In the morning, however, when I woke up and looked at my pillow, I saw that everything was gone. During the night, they had stolen my kimono, my pair of swords, and the stomach band containing my money. I was stunned. I asked the innkeeper if he had seen the 2 men. He said, "Oh, they said they were going on ahead to be in time for a festival at Tushimana Shrine in Awari, and that you were to catch up." Completely overcome, I burst into tears. The kind innkeeper tried to console me. "You know what they were? Con artists, thieves that prey on travelers. And here I thought they were your companions. What a shame. Where will you go now?" "I'm not sure. I was thinking of going somewhere near Kyoto." "Yes, but what can you do with only an underrobe to your name?" The innkeeper was at a loss too, but then he disappeared for a minute and returned with a big ladle. "Well," he said, "you're not the only one from Edo who's been robbed on this road. Here, take this and go to the neighborhood of Hamamatsu and see if you can't beg for a coin or 2. I got up my courage I spent the whole day begging. By evening, I'd received about a peck of rice and wheat and 120 or 130 copper pennies. The innkeeper was a good-hearted man and put me up for the night. The following day, he said, "It might not be a bad idea if you first went to see Ise Shrine and prayed for your well-being." I gave him half of the grain and 50 coppers as a token of my gratitude and headed for Ise. During the day I begged, and after dark I sought shelter in pine groves, on river banks, and in roadside shrines. Swarms of mosquitoes prevented me from sleeping, and believe me, that was no fun. One night, I slept by a big pile of rocks just inside the entrance to a riding ground near Futsu Castle. The riding ground bordered on a bamboo grove, and beyond that stood a temple with the shogun's crest on its main gate. Early in the morning, I was awakened by 14 or 15 samurai who had come to practice riding. They galloped around with an air of fierce determination. But I could tell right away that none of them was any good. As I got up, a couple of the stable boys spotted me, began shouting, "Look, look, a beggar boy, the nerve of him sleeping here." I mumbled some excuses and stayed where I was, squatting on my heels. But the men were so hopelessly clumsy, I couldn't help laughing out loud. The stable boys were indignant. They set on me with their fists, and after knocking me down, dragged me out of the riding ground. A samurai who was about 40 came over. "Hey, you, beggar boy," he said. "How does a kid like you criticize samurai for the way they ride? Where are you from anyway? Come on, speak up." "I'm from Edo. And I'll have you know I wasn't always a beggar." "Do you like horses? Well, let's see you ride then." Clad only in my underrobe, I showed them a thing or two about riding. Everyone was impressed and said to one another, "This wretch must be the son of a samurai." The samurai who had spoken to me earlier said, "Come home with me, and I'll give you a meal." So, after the practice ended, I followed him to his home. He lived on a side street near the residence of the future town magistrate. He told me to wait and soon came out with a tray piled high with rice and soup. It delicious. He came to the kitchen afterwards and asked me my name and who my parents were. When I put him off with some lies, he said, "I feel really sorry for you. Stay with us." And so he gave me a kimono and had his wife arrange my hair and fill a bucket with hot water for me to wash up. The two just couldn't get enough of me. That night, he called me into the living room and questioned me once more about my background. I lied again. I stayed for 6 or 7 days, and the entire time the samurai and his wife looked after me as though I was their own child. I had different plans, however. What good was it making do in a house like this, when I could just as well go to Kyoto and become a retainer in some nobleman's house? So, one evening, I changed into my old underrobe and, folding my kimono and obi neatly by the quilts, I slipped out of the house. I got up before sunrise and ran as fast as I could towards Kyoto. I wandered for several days begging, and at Yokkaichi bumped into Morata, a beggar I knew. We bought food and stretched out on the floor of a pine grove. We talked of all that had happened since we'd last seen each other. Spent the night side by side on a bed of pine needles. You've got to admit, the friendship between beggars is something special. I wandered listlessly for several days. One night, I've forgotten where I lay down near a cliff. Somehow fell off the edge in my sleep. I must have passed out too. When I regained consciousness the next morning, I realized I had hit my testicles against a sharp rock. It was too painful to walk. I got better, little by little, and by the third day was able to walk around gingerly. By the time I reached Hakone, however, my testicles had been swollen and were beginning to ooze pus. It had been 4 months since I'd run away, and here I was, a samurai wasting my time on things that would never lead to anything. I made up my mind to return to Edo and face whatever punishment my father had in store. Everyone was excited. Kokichi came back. Kokichi came back. I went to my room and slept for 10 days straight. I was told that in my absence, the family had offered up all kinds of prayers and incantations and had even sent a cousin, a nun called Kaisan, all the way to Kyoto to look for me. A doctor was sent for. After examining me, he said, "Now, is there something you want to tell me about yourself below the waist?" My testicles were still in bad shape, but I stubbornly denied any trouble. Within 3 months, however, they had become so infected that I could no longer move about. I had to stay at home for the next 2 years. My father reported my return to the commissioner, Ishikawa. "It is indeed a shameful turn of events," my father said. "I will see that Kokichi retires, that someone is adopted to replace him as head of the Katsu family." But Ishikawa disagreed. If Kokichi hadn't returned by the end of the month, I would have taken measures to end the family line. But he's come back. All's well that ends well. Leave him be. By the time he's older, he will no doubt have mended his ways and will be able to perform some useful service. For now, take good care of him. All concerned were mightily relieved, I was told. I made the rounds of the powers that be. I went to the commissioner's home and begged him to recommend me for a post. I even submitted a list of the misdeeds I had committed, adding a request that I be considered now that I had repented. Agent came from his office one day. "Be forewarned that we will be sending out investigators to gather information on you." I waited expectantly. The commissioner spoke to me one morning. "Your followers simply refuse to tell on you. And though you've confessed everything, we find upon investigating that the mischief you've done is far more serious than you say. Be that as it may, you have repented, and that's good enough for me. I will do my best to get you an appointment. Continue to report diligently." I showed up at his residence with renewed fervor and practiced fencing in my spare time. Often enough, my name was entered onto the rolls of candidates, but not once was I given a post, and that I found very galling. I was anxious to find official employment, but I also had to dash around making money. Then my father died, and I lost heart completely. His death was unexpected. It seems he'd had a stroke. I was giving fencing lessons at Azuki Inari Shrine when one of his young retainers came running with the news. I raced to my father's place, but it was too late. I stayed on helping out and left the following morning. The next few days were taking up with my father's affairs. My own son was then 5. I went back to business as soon as the mourning period of 49 days was completed. It then seemed like a good idea to form a sword association in which members would pay dues and take turns buying a sword. I invited my fellow swordsmen and friends to join. One day, I went to the shogunate prison in Senju and tested my sword on the corpses of criminals who had been executed. After that, I became a student of Asu Emon and learned how to lop off the head of corpses with a single stroke. My new landlord, Okano, was a rake and a spendthrift. He owed 17 ryo to a tea house, and, unable to pay, was being threatened with a lawsuit. He came to see me. I just moved in, and in my ignorance, I got together some cash for him. But Okano got into debt again, having obtained 70 ryo at 5% interest a month to buy a prostitute out of her contract. The trouble was, as security, he had handed over the ledger recording the payment of rice taxes by his retainers. The retainers at home and on his fiefs came to me for advice. I got back the document by putting up as security swords and other goods. My landlord, however, made no move to help me get my goods back. I eventually retrieved them one by one, but from then on, I was always hard-pressed for cash. With all my social obligations, it was an awful nuisance. For a while, I managed to survive by selling what I had left. But I soon ran out of goods and was forced to sell my own possessions. Oh, I hated parting with them. I collected them painstakingly over the years. But what else would I do? I sold off every single item, and at half the original cost. I went back immediately to my sword business. Every night, I went to the second-hand goods market in Kanda and Hondro, and being a pretty sharp bargainer, I soon set aside a tidy sum. Many of the friends I had helped in times of trouble came to me when they had swords to sell. But since they were not knowledgeable about swords, I never made a loss. One day, home of the son of Tsuchina. I got into a big fight with Kuma, the son of an employee of the Copper Mint in Hashibiya. We were on the second floor, so I picked up Kuma, threw him down the stairs. He had to be carried home by some men who came running from the mint. And a while later, about 30 men appeared with hooked spears, began surrounding the house. I flung off my outer garments, hitched up the hem of my kimono, and rushed outside swinging my sword. I forced the men to retreat 200 or 300 yards. Just then a band of men arrived from the local patrol office to break up the fight. After this, even the crooks and shrews who were hired to escort customers to the brothels drew away as soon as they saw me. There are other adventures, but they took place so long ago I have all but forgotten them. Both of my older brothers kept a close watch on me. I couldn't care less, and passed my days carousing to my heart's content. For the last 3 or 4 years I had fallen into dissolute ways, and had been spending most of my time in the Yoshiwara. So much so that the roughnecks who prowled through the quarters came to be my underlings, and no one dared defy me. Naturally, this took huge amounts of money, but I was determined not to fall into debt. So, I hustled every night at the markets. Night in the summer, I was summoned to Hiko Shiro, my brother's house. Everyone was in tears. His wife took me to the room and said, "Kokichi, why do you persist in behaving so recklessly? Your brother has made inquiries about you here, and is worried you might do something truly dreadful. So he's decided to lock you up in a cage." Shintaro and the rest of us tried to talk him out of it, but he wouldn't listen. The cage was finished yesterday. It's in the garden. We went out to the garden. The cage was sturdily built with double enclosures. I said to Shintaro and my sister-in-law, "I appreciate my brother's concern. I've already made up my mind to stay in the cage for good, and not to come out even if I'm forgiven. You see, around where I live in Honjo, I'm well known and regarded as a hero of sorts. But after humiliation like this, I could never show my face to my fellow man. I will fast and die as soon as possible. My sister-in-law pleaded with me. How did things come to this? Please, turn over a new leaf. What sense would there be if I did? Ever since my father died, I've had no one to turn to. And as for any hope of obtaining office, I gave that up a long time ago. I decided I might as well do what I want and die. I really think it would be better if I went in the cage. Couldn't you at least go home and talk it over with your wife? That won't be necessary. As I said, I'm not at all worried about my family. Rintaro is 16. He'd be better off if I was dead. If I lived too long, I'd only be a nuisance. My sister-in-law insisted that I go home for the time being. I went home and waited. At 8, I'd still received no word. So I took off for the Yoshiwara and stayed for the night. Shintaro urged me to write a letter of apology to my brother. He'd have to be appeased one way or another. I couldn't be bothered. Then I heard that my sister-in-law, worried sick, was going from temple to temple, asking for prayers on my behalf. I decided to put her mind at rest, once and for all. The following spring, I passed on the family headship to Rintaro. I was 37. My past conduct truly fills me with horror. I am most fortunate in having a filial and obedient son. My daughters, too, are very devoted. My wife has never gone against my wishes. I am altogether satisfied to have lived until now without any serious mishap. At 42, I've understood for the first time what it means to follow in the path of righteousness, to serve one's Lord and one's Father, to live with one's kinsmen in harmony, and to have compassion and love for one's wife, children, and servants. Let my children, their children, and their children's children read this record carefully and savor its meaning. So be it.